Blood trickled down Zara's hand as she clutched the torn first-class tickets. The flight attendant's smirk vanished when CEO Jackson Miles emerged from the cockpit. "Those are my daughters you just humiliated." Suddenly, everyone realized who owned Horizon Airlines. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more incredible stories of justice served. Can you imagine the look on that flight attendant's face when she realized her career was about to crash and burn? Let's find out what happened next. Zara and Amara Miles were not your average 17-year-old twins. While most high school seniors spent their days worrying about prom dates and college applications, these two exceptional young women had already secured their futures. Zara, the more analytical of the pair, had been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship to study business and economics. Amara, with her passion for medicine and social justice, had received an early acceptance letter from Yale. Their academic achievements alone would have been remarkable for any teenager, but for two young black women from South Chicago, their success represented something far greater. Their father, Terrell Miles, beamed with pride whenever he spoke about his daughters. At 45, Terrell had built an empire from nothing, transforming from an airline baggage handler to the owner and CEO of Horizon Airlines, now the fifth largest carrier in the United States. His journey began 23 years earlier, when he worked double shifts at O'Hare International Airport, studying business administration at night while saving every penny. "My girls have never had it easy," Terrell often told his executives. "And I never wanted them to." Despite their father's wealth and influence, Zara and Amara grew up understanding the value of hard work. Their modest home in South Chicago remained their primary residence even after Terrell could afford mansions in any city. He wanted his daughters to stay connected to their roots, to understand the community that shaped them. "Money changes how people see you," he would tell the twins. "But it doesn't change who you are unless you let it." Throughout their school years, the twins faced subtle and not-so-subtle racism. Teachers who seemed surprised by their articulate presentations. Classmates who suggested they were only accepted into advanced programs to fill diversity quotas. Store security guards who followed them through upscale boutiques. But Terrell had taught them to meet each challenge with dignity and excellence. "You'll always have to work twice as hard to get half as far," he would say. "But that's what makes you stronger than the rest." Terrell's philosophy extended to how he raised his daughters. He never used his position to demand special treatment for them. When Zara faced discrimination from a science teacher who refused to recommend her for a prestigious summer program, Terrell didn't storm into the school threatening to use his influence. Instead, he helped her find 3 other teachers who recognized her brilliance and wrote glowing recommendations. "The world isn't fair," he told her. "But you don't win by demanding fairness. You win by being so exceptional they can't ignore you." After years of watching his daughters excel despite the barriers placed before them, Terrell decided they deserved a special reward. Their high school graduation coincided with their 18th birthday, and he planned an extravagant surprise. 2 weeks in Paris, staying at the prestigious Hotel Krillin, with first-class airfare on Horizon Airlines' newest luxury aircraft. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The twins had just completed their final exams, ending their high school careers with perfect grade point averages. Zara had led the debate team to a national championship, while Amara had published research in a medical journal, accomplishments that had earned them national recognition. The morning of their departure, Terrell received an emergency call. A potential partnership with a European airline was in jeopardy, requiring his immediate attention at headquarters. "I'll meet you at the gate," he promised the twins over breakfast. "Just go through the normal check-in process. Your tickets are in the envelope on the counter." The twins arrived at O'Hare International Airport 3 hours before their flight, dressed in comfortable traveling clothes. Zara in stylish joggers and a vintage t-shirt, Amara in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt. They carried small backpacks and rolled designer luggage their father had given them as early graduation gifts. It would be their first time experiencing first-class travel, a luxury Terrell rarely indulged in himself despite owning the airline. "I can't believe we're finally going to Paris," Amara squealed as they approached the first-class check-in counter. "Dad has been promising this trip since we were 12. Zara smiled, clutching the envelope containing their tickets. "And in first class too. I wonder if the seats really do turn into beds like in the commercials." Little did they know that their dream trip was about to turn into a nightmare that would shake Horizon Airlines to its core. Veronica Hartwell had worked as a flight attendant for 15 years. At 43, she had developed what she considered an essential skill in her profession, the ability to know who belongs in first class. It wasn't something she would admit publicly, but privately, she prided herself on maintaining what she called standards for the premium cabin. Her colleagues knew that Veronica was particularly vigilant about keeping certain elements from accessing the exclusive space unless they clearly looked the part. When she spotted the Miles twins approaching the first-class check-in counter, alarm bells immediately rang in her head. Two young black girls in casual clothes didn't fit her mental image of first-class passengers. Veronica adjusted her perfectly pressed uniform and made her way to the counter, nodding to the gate agent to step aside. "Good morning," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Are you two perhaps at the wrong counter? General boarding is down that way." She pointed toward the economy check-in area, where a considerably longer line had formed. Zara stepped forward, her voice calm and measured. "No, we're in the right place. We have first-class tickets to Paris." She handed over the envelope their father had left them. Veronica took the envelope between two manicured fingers as if it might be contaminated. She opened it slowly, examining the tickets with exaggerated scrutiny. "And how exactly did you obtain these tickets?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. "They were purchased for us," Zara replied evenly, though her heart had begun to race. She recognized the familiar feeling, the one that surfaced whenever someone questioned her right to occupy a certain space. "Purchased by whom?" Veronica pressed, looking from Zara to Amara. "These are very expensive tickets." By now, several other passengers had begun to notice the interaction. An older white couple directly behind the twins exchanged glances. A businessman in an expensive suit frowned, checking his watch impatiently. "Our father purchased them," Amara interjected, her voice carrying a sharp edge that Zara recognized as her sister's patience wearing thin. "Is there a problem with our tickets?" Veronica's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'll need to see some identification. And the credit card that was used to purchase these tickets." Zara reached into her pocket for her driver's license while Amara did the same. "We don't have the credit card. Our father bought these as a gift." "I see," Veronica said, drawing out the words. "And where is your father now?" "He's meeting us at the gate," Zara explained, maintaining her composure despite the growing knot in her stomach. "He had a business emergency this morning." Veronica handed back their identification but held on to the tickets. "I'm afraid I'll need additional verification. These tickets seem unusual." She tapped at her computer terminal, making a show of checking something in the system. "What's unusual about them?" Amara demanded, her voice rising slightly. "They're just first-class tickets." The line behind them had grown, and people were beginning to shift restlessly. Zara could feel the weight of stares on her back. The familiar heat of humiliation crept up her neck. "Well, for one thing," Veronica said with manufactured concern, "we don't typically see young people like yourselves in first class without adult supervision. Especially on international flights." "We're 18, Zara stated firmly. "Legal adults. We don't need supervision." The businessman behind them cleared his throat loudly. "Some of us have flights to catch," he muttered. Veronica ignored him, focusing instead on her terminal. "There seems to be an issue with these tickets. I'll need to speak with my supervisor." "What issue?" Amara challenged. "Be specific." Veronica's smile tightened further. I need to verify that these tickets weren't purchased fraudulently. It wouldn't be the first time someone has used a stolen credit card or found discarded tickets. The accusation hung in the air, unmistakable in its implication. Zara felt her sister stiffen beside her. Are you accusing us of theft? Zara asked quietly, conscious of the growing audience. I'm simply doing my job, Veronica replied. Protecting the airline from fraud. Perhaps if you told me how exactly you came to have these tickets. We already told you, Amara interrupted, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. Our father bought them for us as a graduation gift. Yes, this mysterious father who isn't here, Veronica said with a condescending smile. I'm sure he did. The gate agent who had been hovering nearby looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. Other airline staff glanced over occasionally but quickly averted their eyes. Can I speak to your supervisor? Zara requested, struggling to maintain her calm. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. My supervisor will say the same thing, Veronica replied. Without proper verification, I cannot allow you to board with these tickets. She held the tickets up, examining them again under the bright airport lights. In fact, I believe these may be counterfeit. Before either twin could protest, Veronica did something shocking. She tore the tickets in half, the sound of ripping paper cutting through the ambient noise of the terminal. What are you doing? Zara gasped, reaching for the torn pieces. As she grabbed for them, the sharp edge of the paper sliced into her palm. Blood welled up immediately, a bright red line across her dark skin. Now look what you've done, Veronica said, stepping back as if Zara had been the aggressor. Security. Zara clutched her bleeding hand, the torn ticket pieces stained with drops of blood. Amara wrapped a protective arm around her sister, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. You had no right to do that, Amara's voice shook. Those tickets are our property. Veronica stood her ground. Counterfeit tickets are not property. They're evidence of attempted fraud. I suggest you both leave before security arrives and things get more complicated. The surrounding passengers had gone quiet, the scene unfolding like a dramatic play. Some looked embarrassed, others curious, a few seemed to share Veronica's suspicion of the twins. No one stepped forward to help. It was at that precise moment that a commanding voice cut through the tension like a knife. What the hell is going on here? Terrell Miles moved through the terminal with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding attention. At 6'3", dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that highlighted his athletic build, he cut an imposing figure. His closely cropped salt and pepper hair and trimmed beard gave him a distinguished appearance that matched his position as one of the most successful black entrepreneurs in America. He had arrived at the gate earlier than expected, his meeting concluded more rapidly than anticipated. For several moments, he observed the confrontation from a distance, his expression darkening as he watched the flight attendant tear his daughter's tickets. When he saw blood on Zara's hand, something snapped inside him. What the hell is going on here? Terrell's deep voice carried across the gate area, causing heads to turn and conversations to halt mid-sentence. Veronica Hartwell's head snapped up at the sound, her professional smile automatically sliding into place before recognition dawned in her eyes. The color drained from her face as the CEO of Horizon Airline strode directly toward her. Mr. Miles, she stammered, her confident demeanor evaporating instantly. I didn't expect to see you here today. Clearly, Terrell replied, his voice dangerously quiet as he reached his daughter's. He gently took Zara's bleeding hand, examining the cut before pulling a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapping it around her palm. Are you all right? Zara nodded, relief washing over her face. Amara, however, was too angry for relief. Dad, she tore up our tickets. She accused us of stealing them or using a stolen credit card. Terrell's gaze remained fixed on Veronica, who seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. The surrounding passengers and airline staff had gone completely silent, all pretense of not watching abandoned. Those are my daughters you just humiliated, Terrell stated, his voice controlled but resonating with fury. "Would you like to explain to me why you destroyed their valid first-class tickets and accused them of fraud?" Veronica's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. The revelation that these teenagers were the daughters of Terrell Miles, the owner and CEO of Horizon Airlines, had struck her like a physical blow. There was a misunderstanding," she finally managed. "They didn't. I mean, they didn't identify themselves as your daughters. Why should they have to?" Terrell asked, his voice still measured but cutting. "Do all first-class passengers need to justify their presence to you? Or just the black ones?" The accusation hung in the air, unavoidable and damning. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. The gate agent stared fixedly at her computer screen, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. "Of course not, sir," Veronica protested, desperation creeping into her voice. "It's just that they're so young, and we've had incidents of ticket fraud recently. I was following protocol." "Protocol?" Terrell raised an eyebrow. "Show me the protocol that instructs flight attendants to destroy passengers' tickets and accuse them of theft without evidence." When no answer came, he turned to the gate agent. "Please rebook my daughters on the next flight to Paris. First class. And have someone from medical take a look at my daughter's hand." The gate agent nodded vigorously, fingers already flying over her keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Miles. Right away." "As for you," Terrell turned back to Veronica, "I want you in my office in 30 minutes. Bring your supervisor and anyone else involved in creating what you call protocol. A man in an expensive Italian suit who had been observing from nearby stepped slightly closer, his interest piqued. Jackson Davies, executive vice president of rival Transcontinental Airways, had been at O'Hare for a meeting of his own. He discreetly took out his phone and began typing a message to his public relations team. Veronica's face had gone from pale to ashen. "Mr. Miles, please, I have a family to support. This job is everything to me. You should have thought about that before you decided my daughters didn't belong in first class," Terrell replied coldly. He turned to Zara and Amara. "Go with the gate agent. She'll take care of everything. I'll join you as soon as I've handled this situation." As the twins followed the now solicitous gate agent, whispers erupted throughout the terminal. Smartphones captured the aftermath, social media already beginning to buzz with fragmentary accounts of what had transpired. Terrell watched his daughters walk away, his composure intact but anger simmering just beneath the surface. He had built Horizon Airlines from nothing, pouring his life into creating a company that embodied excellence and opportunity. The idea that his own daughters could be treated this way on his airline cut him to the core. Mr. Miles, a nearby passenger, approached hesitantly. "I witnessed everything. What happened to your daughters was disgraceful. If you need someone to corroborate their story." "Thank you," Terrell nodded. "I may take you up on that." As he guided Veronica toward the administrative offices, Terrell was acutely aware of Jackson Davies watching with calculating interest. The two CEOs acknowledged each other with brief nods, both understanding that what had begun as a personal incident was rapidly evolving into something with far-reaching implications for Horizon Airlines. The medical staff arrived quickly to attend to Zara's cut, which fortunately proved superficial. As the twins were escorted to the VIP lounge to await their rebooked flight, they experienced the whiplash of going from being treated as potential criminals to receiving deferential service. "Do you think Dad will fire her?" Amara asked once they were alone. Zara examined her bandaged hand. "I don't know. But I've never seen him that angry before." What neither of them could predict was how this single incident would spiral into a crisis that would shake Horizon Airlines to its foundations and force their family to confront uncomfortable truths about the company Terrell had built. The sleek glass-walled conference room on the executive floor of Horizon Airlines O'Hare terminal buzzed with tension. Terrell Miles sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of controlled fury as he stared down Veronica Hartwell and her immediate supervisor, Bradley Thompson. In the 15 minutes since the confrontation at the gate, Terrell had summoned his senior leadership team for an emergency meeting. "Explain to me," Terrell began, his voice deceptively calm, "how a 15-year employee of my airline felt empowered to tear up valid first-class tickets and accuse passengers of fraud based on nothing but their appearance." Veronica stared at the table, unable to meet his gaze. Bradley Thompson, a middle-aged white man with thinning hair and a perpetual expression of mild discomfort, cleared his throat. "Mr. Miles, I want to assure you that what happened is not reflective of our company policies or values." Ms. Hartwell clearly exercised poor judgment in this situation. "Did she?" Terrell challenged, leaning forward. "Because I'm beginning to wonder if her actions reflect exactly what's happening in my company when I'm not looking." The door opened, and Sidney Powell rushed in. As Horizon's crisis management director, the 35-year-old black woman had been with the company for only 6 months, recruited from a top PR firm in New York. Her expression was grave as she took a seat. "It's already on Twitter," she announced without preamble. #Horizon discrimination is trending in 3 cities. We have approximately 30 minutes before this hits mainstream media. Terrell nodded grimly. "What are we looking at, Sidney?" "Multiple passenger videos, eyewitness accounts. The narrative is forming around racial profiling. The fact that the victims are your daughters is amplifying the story." Sidney's fingers flew across her tablet. "The first calls from reporters are already coming in." In the VIP lounge, Zara and Amara sat in plush chairs, untouched glasses of sparkling water before them. The cut on Zara's hand had been professionally bandaged, but the emotional wound still felt raw. "Maybe we should just cancel the trip," Amara suggested, scrolling through her phone. "This is blowing up online. People are recognizing us from the photos." Zara shook her head. "If we cancel, she wins. Besides, Dad would be disappointed. He wanted this trip to be special for us." "Special?" Amara laughed bitterly. "Being humiliated in front of a terminal full of people isn't exactly what I had in mind for special." Back in the conference room, Bradley Thompson was attempting to minimize the situation. "Ms. Hartwell has an otherwise spotless record," he insisted. "Perhaps we could issue a statement about an isolated incident, a misunderstanding." Sidney Powell cut him off. "I've been reviewing her personnel file. This isn't isolated. There have been 3 customer complaints about Ms. Hartwell in the past year alone, all from minority passengers claiming they were questioned about their right to be in first class." Terrell's expression darkened further. "And how were these complaints handled?" Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "They were addressed at the regional level. Given her seniority and otherwise good performance, she received additional customer service training." "In other words, they were buried," Terrell stated flatly. "Who signed off on that decision?" Before Bradley could answer, Sidney's tablet chimed with an alert. "Sir, Transcontinental Airways just issued a statement. At Transcontinental, we believe first-class service should be available to all qualifying passengers regardless of race, age, or appearance. They're capitalizing on this already." Terrell wasn't surprised. Jackson Davies wouldn't waste any opportunity to gain a competitive advantage. The rivalry between Horizon and Transcontinental had been fierce for years, with both airlines competing for the same premium customers. "Sidney, prepare a statement. We need to get ahead of this. Full transparency, no excuses. Acknowledge what happened, make it clear that the employee has been suspended pending investigation, and emphasize our commitment to addressing any systemic issues." "Suspended?" Veronica gasped, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. "Mr. Miles, please." "I made a mistake, but my record, your record," Terrell interrupted, "includes multiple similar incidents that somehow never made it to my desk. Consider yourself lucky that suspension is all we're discussing at the moment." As the meeting continued, the Miles twins debated their next steps. "I just got a text from Dad," Zara said. They've rebooked us on the 4 o'clock flight. He says we can still go if we want to, or we can reschedule. Amara sighed. What do you think? Before Zara could answer, a flight attendant entered the lounge, practically bowing as she approached. Ms. Miles, is there anything at all I can get for you? Perhaps some food? A magazine? Anything at all? The sudden obsequiousness was almost as uncomfortable as the earlier discrimination. Zara politely declined, and the attendant retreated, but not before assuring them that she would be right outside if needed. Well, that's not weird at all, Amara muttered once the attendant had gone. This is what it's going to be like now, Zara realized aloud. Everyone's going to be walking on eggshells around us. In his conference room, Terrell was making a disturbing discovery. As Sydney dug deeper into company records, a pattern was emerging. Complaints about discriminatory treatment had been systematically minimized and buried at the regional management level. What's more, the data showed a troubling trend in hiring and promotion practices. How did I not see this? Terrell asked, more to himself than anyone in the room. You built an airline focused on excellence, Sydney answered carefully. But somewhere along the way, some people interpreted excellence to mean exclusivity, in the worst sense. The revelation hit Terrell like a physical blow. He had been so focused on building a successful business, on proving that a black man from South Chicago could create a world-class airline, that he had missed the cancer growing within his own company. Bradley Thompson, sensing the shifting tide, attempted to distance himself. I assure you, Mr. Miles, I had no knowledge of any systematic issues. These incidents were handled at lower levels. Terrell fixed him with a piercing stare. You're the Vice President of Customer Experience, Bradley. If you didn't know, it's because you chose not to know. Before the discussion could continue, Sydney received another alert. Sir, Veronica Hartwell's husband just posted on Facebook defending her actions. He's claiming she's being made a scapegoat and has retained counsel. Terrell closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. When he opened them, his decision was made. Sydney, expand the statement. We're launching a comprehensive review of all hiring, training, and customer complaint procedures. Bradley, you're on administrative leave pending investigation. Veronica, your suspension is effective immediately. As Bradley and Veronica were escorted out, Terrell turned to Sydney. I need to speak with my daughters. This isn't just about one incident anymore. It's about the soul of my company. Are you watching this unfold and feeling as outraged as I am? Comment number 1 if you believe Terrell is right to suspend both employees, or number 2 if you think he's overreacting to protect his daughters. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking true stories about discrimination and justice. What do you think will happen next? Will the twins continue their trip to Paris, or will this incident completely derail their plans? And how will Horizon Airlines recover from this PR nightmare? Let's find out. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, Zara and Amara Miles boarded Horizon Airlines Flight 372 to Paris. After much discussion, they had decided to continue with their trip, refusing to let the morning's ugliness derail their long-anticipated graduation celebration. Their father had arranged for a different crew to staff the first-class cabin, and the replacement flight attendant, a worn black woman named Janelle Washington, greeted them with genuine professionalism rather than the forced deference they had experienced in the VIP lounge. Welcome aboard, Ms. Miles and Ms. Miles, Janelle said with a smile that reached her eyes. I'm so sorry about what happened earlier. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable. The twins settled into their luxurious seats, accepting glasses of sparkling water as the other first-class passengers boarded. They could feel curious glances directed their way, could hear the whispers. Word had spread throughout the airport about who they were and what had happened. I feel like we're in a fishbowl, Amara murmured to her sister. Zara adjusted her seat slightly. Just focus on Paris. In 8 hours, we'll be in the City of Light, and no one will know who we are. As they settled in, Zara found herself thinking about other incidents they had faced over the years. None had been as dramatic as today's confrontation, but there had been countless small cuts: the boutique saleswoman who had followed them through the store, the teacher who had suggested Amara's science project must have been completed with extra help, the college interviewer who had expressed surprise at Zara's eloquence. Their father had always taught them to rise above such treatment, to prove their worth through excellence rather than complaints. But now, seeing how he had responded to today's incident, she wondered if that approach had its limits. Back at Horizon headquarters, Terrell paced the executive lounge, phone pressed to his ear as he addressed his board of directors. "Yes, I understand the stock implications," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "But this isn't just about PR. We have a fundamental problem in our corporate culture that needs to be addressed." The response from Garrett Wilson, the board chairman, was predictable. "Terrell, we all sympathize with what happened to your daughters. It was inexcusable. But a company-wide investigation could expose us to significant liability. The prudent approach would be to handle this specific incident decisively and move on." Terrell stopped pacing. "And by handle decisively, you mean fire Veronica Hartwell and pretend the problem doesn't go deeper?" "I'm saying we need to be strategic," Garrett replied carefully. "Your emotional involvement might be clouding your judgment." The implication was clear: this was personal for Terrell, not business. The fact that racial discrimination might actually be bad for business seemed lost on Garrett and several other board members. "My judgment is perfectly clear," Terrell responded coldly. "Sidney Powell is already reviewing all customer complaints from the past 3 years. If we find a pattern, we address it openly. That's not emotion, it's integrity." As Terrell continued his battle with the board, Sidney made a troubling discovery. Searching through the company's human resources database, she found that complaints about discriminatory treatment had been routinely classified as customer service issues, rather than potential civil rights violations. This seemingly innocuous categorization had effectively buried the pattern, keeping it from triggering automatic reviews or escalations to senior management. More disturbing still, Sidney uncovered an informal email chain among certain mid-level managers discussing ways to maintain a premium image in first class by discouraging inappropriate bookings. The coded language was thin enough that anyone reading between the lines could understand the true meaning. On the flight to Paris, the twins tried to enjoy the first-class experience. The seats were indeed as comfortable as advertised, reclining fully into beds. The food was exquisite, the entertainment options endless. Yet a cloud hung over what should have been the beginning of a joyous adventure. "Look at this," Amara said, showing her phone to Zara. #Horizon Discrimination has over 50,000 tweets. And people are sharing their own stories. Zara scanned the feed, her heart sinking as she read account after account of passengers who claimed to have experienced similar treatment on Horizon flights. Some stories dated back years. "Dad must be devastated," she whispered. "He's always been so proud of Horizon." Meanwhile, Transcontinental Airways was wasting no time in exploiting the situation. Jackson Davies had instructed his marketing team to fast-track a new campaign built around the tagline, "First-class service for everyone." Without directly mentioning Horizon or the incident, the messaging was clear: Transcontinental welcomed diversity, while its competitor did not. 7 hours later, as the twins' flight began its descent into Charles de Gaulle Airport, Terrell received troubling news from Sidney. "Sir, Veronica Hartwell just gave an unauthorized interview to Channel 7 News. She's claiming she's being scapegoated for following unwritten company policies. She mentioned specific executives by name." Terrell closed his eyes briefly. "Send me the footage. And get legal on the phone." The interview was worse than he had feared. Veronica, tearful but defiant, portrayed herself as a victim of corporate politics. "I was just doing what we were trained to do," she insisted to the sympathetic reporter. "We were told to maintain a certain image in first class. Everyone knew what that meant, but no one would say it explicitly." And now that it's blown up in their faces, they're hanging me out to dry. When asked if she believed Horizon Airlines had a culture of racial discrimination, Veronica hesitated before answering. I think, there are expectations about who belongs in certain spaces. And those expectations come from the top. The implication that Terrell himself endorsed discriminatory practices was as false as it was damaging. But the seed had been planted in the public consciousness. When the twins landed in Paris, they were surprised to find a small group of reporters waiting at the arrival gate. Someone had leaked their flight information. Ms. Miles, a reporter called out. How does it feel to know your father's airline has been discriminating against people who look like you? Another thrust a microphone forward. Will you be calling for a boycott of Horizon Airlines? Stunned and exhausted from their flight, the twins said nothing, allowing airport security to escort them past the media gauntlet to their waiting car. The dream vacation they had anticipated for years had now become something entirely different. As they settled into the luxury car taking them to their hotel, Zara looked at her sister. This isn't going away, is it? Amara shook her head, staring out at the Parisian streets that should have filled her with excitement but now barely registered. No. I think it's just beginning. Neither twin could have predicted how prophetic those words would prove to be. 1 week into what should have been an idyllic Parisian vacation, Zara and Amara Miles found themselves holed up in their suite at the Hotel Krillin, monitoring the growing crisis from afar. Their planned excursions to the Louvre, Eiffel Tower, and Notre Dame had been overshadowed by the media firestorm surrounding Horizon Airlines. Dad called again, Amara said, putting down her phone. Horizon stock dropped another 8% today. That's 23% since last week. Zara looked up from her laptop. The boycott calls are spreading. Look at this Twitter thread. On the screen was a post from a former Horizon flight attendant named Jasmine Taylor, who had worked for the airline 3 years earlier. Her thread detailed a toxic culture where black flight attendants were routinely assigned to economy class while their white counterparts worked first class. According to Jasmine, complaints about this practice were met with thinly veiled threats about performance reviews and team fit. How could Dad not know about this? Amara wondered aloud. Zara closed the laptop. You know how focused he gets. He probably trusted his executives to handle personnel issues while he concentrated on business growth. That assessment wasn't far from the truth. In his Chicago office, Terrell Miles was confronting the painful reality that his singular focus on building Horizon into a competitive airline had created blind spots that others had exploited. The board is split, Sidney Powell informed him as they prepared for yet another emergency meeting. Half support your call for a comprehensive investigation and overhaul. The others, led by Garrett Wilson, are pushing to contain the damage by framing this as an isolated incident. Terrell's expression hardened. And their solution? They want you to issue a personal statement explaining that while the incident with your daughters was regrettable, it doesn't reflect Horizon's values. They want to announce Veronica's termination, offer some sensitivity training for staff, and move on. Sidney's disapproval was evident in her tone. And sweep everything under the rug, Terrell concluded. Not happening. The board meeting that followed was contentious. Garrett Wilson, a 62-year-old white man who had been with Horizon since its early days, led the faction arguing for minimal disruption. Our first responsibility is to shareholders, Garrett insisted. This witch hunt you're proposing could expose us to lawsuits, regulatory scrutiny, and further stock devaluation. Terrell leaned forward. Our first responsibility is to run an ethical company. If we've failed at that, we fix it, whatever it costs. Easy for you to say, another board member, Philip Carlson, interjected. Your family wealth won't be significantly impacted by a temporary stock dip. Some of us have more exposure. The implication. That Terrell's decision was a luxury afforded by his wealth, ignited his anger. My family started with nothing, Philip. Everything I have, I built. And I didn't build it to preside over a company that discriminates against people who look like my daughters. Meanwhile, Veronica Hartwell had become an unlikely media figure. After her initial interview, other networks had picked up her story. Depending on the outlet, she was portrayed either as a whistleblower exposing corporate hypocrisy or as a disgruntled employee playing the victim after being caught in an act of discrimination. Transcontinental Airways had approached her through intermediaries, suggesting that once the dust settled, they might have a position for her. The irony wasn't lost on Veronica. The same competitors now courting her would have reacted exactly as Horizon had if faced with similar circumstances. But principle had given way to opportunism all around. In Paris, the twins had discovered a social media group composed of former Horizon employees sharing similar stories of discrimination. What had begun as isolated complaints was coalescing into a damning picture of systemic issues. "We should talk to them," Amara suggested after reading through dozens of posts. "These people worked for Dad's company. They deserve to be heard." Zara hesitated. "Dad wouldn't want us getting involved while he's handling things from his end." "Maybe that's part of the problem," Amara countered. "Everyone keeping quiet and letting the system handle things. Look where that's gotten us." The twins' discussion was interrupted by a call from their father. The haggard face that appeared on the video chat told them everything they needed to know about the toll the past week had taken. "I'm flying to Paris tomorrow," Terrell announced without preamble. "We need to talk in person." "Is it that bad?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer. Terrell sighed. "It's worse. Sydney has uncovered evidence that some of our executives have been systematically burying discrimination complaints for years. And not just about passenger treatment, hiring practices, promotion decisions, route assignments for flight crews. There's a pattern." The revelation sent a chill through both young women. Their father had built Horizon Airlines from nothing, pouring his heart and soul into creating what he believed was a meritocracy where excellence was the only criterion that mattered. To discover that his vision had been corrupted from within must be devastating. "What are you going to do?" Amara asked. "That's what I want to discuss with you both," Terrell replied. "This isn't just my company anymore. It's your legacy too. And after what you experienced, you deserve a say in how we address it." After ending the call, the twins sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of responsibility settling over them. They had always known they would eventually take roles in their father's company if they chose to. But neither had expected to be thrust into a crisis of this magnitude before they'd even started college. "We need to talk to those former employees," Zara said finally, reversing her earlier position. "Before Dad gets here. We need to understand exactly what's been happening." Amara nodded. "I'll set up a video call." As the twins prepared to take a more active role in addressing the crisis, Horizon's competitors circled like sharks scenting blood. Jackson Davies of Transcontinental had already approached 3 of Horizon's largest corporate clients, offering significant discounts to switch their business travel contracts. "It's not personal," he assured a Horizon board member who confronted him at an industry event. "It's business. Your company is wounded, and in this industry, wounded companies don't survive long." The blunt assessment was difficult to dispute. Airlines operated on razor-thin margins in the best of times. A prolonged boycott or loss of corporate contracts could push Horizon from profitability to bankruptcy within months. By the time Terrell's plane touched down in Paris the following day, the landscape had shifted yet again. Overnight, an anonymous source had leaked internal emails to the press showing that several Horizon executives had discussed strategies for maintaining a certain clientele in first class through selective enforcement of policies. The coded language wasn't explicit enough to prove racial discrimination in a court of law, but in the court of public opinion, the meaning was clear. Horizon wasn't just dealing with one rogue flight attendant, the problem went much deeper. As Terrell's car navigated the Parisian streets toward the Hotel Krillin, he made a decision. Half measures wouldn't suffice. If Horizon Airlines was to survive as the company he had intended to build, it would require a complete transformation. And that transformation would begin with the truth, no matter how painful. What he didn't know was that his daughters had reached the same conclusion. By the time he arrived at their suite, Zara and Amara had spoken with 12 former Horizon employees and compiled a damning dossier of discriminatory practices that had flourished under the radar of senior leadership. The family reunion wasn't the joyful occasion it should have been, but as the 3 Miles sat together in the elegant suite overlooking the Place de la Concorde, there was a sense of shared purpose that transcended the crisis. "We've made a decision," Zara announced, her voice steady as she met her father's gaze. "We're cutting our trip short. We're coming home to help fix this." Terrell looked from one daughter to the other, pride momentarily displacing the exhaustion in his eyes. "This isn't your battle to fight. You should be enjoying your vacation, preparing for college." Amara shook her head firmly. "It became our battle the moment Veronica Hartwell tore up our tickets. We're Miles women, Dad. We don't run from a fight." For the first time in days, Terrell smiled. "No," he agreed. "We certainly don't." The presidential suite at the Hotel Krillin had been transformed into an impromptu war room. Laptops and tablets covered the antique writing desk, room service trays were scattered across the ornate coffee table, and the breathtaking view of Paris through the balcony doors went largely unappreciated as the Miles family strategized into the early morning hours. "The board is split 6-6, Terrell explained, pacing the luxurious carpet. "If it comes to a vote of no confidence, I'll need every ally I can get." Zara looked up from her laptop where she had been analyzing the dossier of discrimination complaints. "The pattern is clear, Dad. This wasn't just a few isolated incidents. There was an unwritten policy to maintain standards in first class by discouraging certain passengers. And by certain passengers, they meant people who looked like us," Amara added bitterly. Terrell stopped pacing, his expression haunted. "The worst part is that I never saw it. I was so focused on expansion, on proving that a black-owned airline could compete with the legacy carriers, that I missed what was happening right under my nose." "You trusted your executives to uphold your values," Zara said gently. "That's not a crime. But it is a failure of leadership," Terrell countered. "I should have been more vigilant." The family fell silent, each lost in thought until Amara spoke up. "We need to go public with everything." "The board would never approve that," Terrell objected. "The legal exposure, the board is part of the problem," Amara interrupted. "At least some of them. You said yourself that Garrett Wilson and his faction want to bury this. They're more concerned about stock prices than doing what's right." Terrell considered this. "Even if we wanted to go public, we'd need evidence that would stand up to scrutiny. Most of what we have is circumstantial or based on personal accounts." Zara had been unusually quiet, methodically working through the data they had collected. "Maybe not," she said slowly. "I've been cross-referencing the accounts from former employees with the internal communications Sydney uncovered. There's a pattern of specific executives being mentioned repeatedly." She turned her laptop to show her father and sister a spreadsheet she had created. "Look. Bradley Thompson appears in 70% of the complaints. And there's this VP of Talent Acquisition, Diana Mercer, who implemented a cultural fit requirement 3 years ago that seems to have been used to screen out minority candidates for customer-facing roles." Terrell studied the spreadsheet, his expression darkening. "Diana reports directly to Bradley. They've worked together since before I acquired the regional carrier they came from. And both of them have been hiding this from you," Amara concluded. "The question is, who else was involved?" The answer came sooner than expected. At 4 a.m. Paris time, Sydney Powell called with an urgent update. "Sir, I've been working with IT to recover deleted emails," she reported, her voice tense despite the late hour in Chicago. "We found a separate email server that Bradley Thompson and several other executives were using to communicate about sensitive matters." "A shadow communication system," Terrell translated, his jaw tightening. "What did you find?" "It's worse than we thought. They were explicitly discussing ways to discourage urban passengers from booking first class. There are emails congratulating flight attendants who were particularly effective at maintaining standards. Zara and Amara exchanged glances as their father continued the conversation. Who else was involved? Terrell demanded. 3 vice presidents, including Diana Mercer, and... Sydney hesitated. Sir, there are emails from 2 board members. Garrett Wilson and Philip Carlson. The revelation struck Terrell like a physical blow. Send me everything. And Sydney, this stays absolutely confidential for now. After ending the call, Terrell turned to his daughters, his expression grim. It goes all the way to the board. Garrett and Philip were actively encouraging this culture while pretending to support my vision of an inclusive airline. That explains why they're so desperate to contain this, Zara observed. They're not just protecting the company, they're protecting themselves. Terrell nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. We're cutting the trip short. We're flying back tomorrow. What are you going to do? Amara asked. I'm going to clean house, Terrell replied, determination hardening his voice. But I'll need your help. Over the next several hours, the family developed a comprehensive strategy. They would return to Chicago immediately and prepare for a special shareholder meeting that Terrell would call using his authority as CEO and principal shareholder. Before that meeting, they would quietly gather additional evidence and secure allies both within and outside the company. As dawn broke over Paris, casting golden light across the room they had occupied all night, Terrell looked at his daughters with pride. This isn't how I imagined your graduation celebration. You should be enjoying Paris, not dealing with corporate intrigue. Zara smiled tiredly. There will be other trips to Paris. Right now, this is more important. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Veronica Hartwell was being courted by Horizon's competitors. What had begun as subtle overtures had evolved into explicit job offers, contingent on her continuing to speak publicly about Horizon's culture. She found herself in the uncomfortable position of being celebrated by people who, under different circumstances, might have treated her exactly as she had treated the Miles twins. They're using me, she confided to her husband over dinner. They don't care about what happened. They just want to damage Horizon. And Horizon threw you under the bus, her husband reminded her. You were following the unwritten rules everyone knew about. Why should you take the fall alone? The argument was persuasive, but Veronica couldn't shake the image of Zara Miles's bleeding hand, the result of her impulsive decision to tear the first-class tickets. That moment of cruelty, born of assumptions she had never questioned, had set everything in motion. As the Miles family prepared to return to Chicago, Jackson Davies of Transcontinental Airways was making his move. He had instructed his team to prepare a formal offer to acquire Horizon Airlines at a price significantly below market value, planning to present it when Horizon's stock hit its lowest point. Terrell Miles built a good airline, he told his executive team. But he's in over his head now. This discrimination scandal will sink him. We'll acquire his routes and aircraft at a discount, shed the problematic assets, and emerge stronger than ever. What Davies didn't know was that the Miles family was no longer playing defense. They were about to launch a counterattack that would expose not just the problems within Horizon, but the systemic issues plaguing the entire industry. 48 hours later, the Miles family landed in Chicago. As their private car pulled away from O'Hare, Terrell outlined the next steps in their plan. Sydney has secured the evidence. Legal is preparing the documentation for the board meeting. We have 48 hours to lock down our strategy before the shareholder meeting. Zara, who had been monitoring social media throughout the flight, looked up from her phone. Veronica Hartwell is scheduled to appear on Good Morning America tomorrow. They're promoting it as an exclusive insider account of discrimination at Horizon. Terrell nodded, unsurprised. Let her talk. By the time we're done, her story will be just one small part of a much larger narrative. Back at Horizon headquarters, Sidney Powell was working late, compiling the evidence that would be presented at the shareholder meeting. When her office phone rang, she answered without checking the caller ID. Sidney Powell. Ms. Powell, this is Diana Mercer. The vice president of talent acquisition's voice was tense. I understand you've been accessing certain archived emails. I'd like to discuss that with you. Sidney's hand tightened on the phone. Any inquiries should go through the CEO's office, Ms. Mercer. I'm acting under Mr. Miles's direct authorization. Of course, Diana replied smoothly. I just thought we might have a conversation, colleague to colleague. Before things get unnecessarily complicated. The implied threat wasn't subtle. Sidney ended the call and immediately contacted Terrell, who instructed her to document the conversation and continue her work with additional security measures in place. The battle lines were being drawn. On one side stood Terrell Miles and his daughters, determined to expose and eradicate the discrimination that had taken root in their company. On the other stood executives and board members who had betrayed Terrell's vision, now desperate to protect themselves as their carefully constructed system began to crumble. The following morning, as Veronica Hartwell prepared for her national television appearance, the Miles family gathered in Terrell's home office to finalize their strategy. What had begun as a personal humiliation for Zara and Amara had evolved into something much more significant, a turning point not just for Horizon Airlines, but potentially for an industry that had long struggled with issues of diversity and inclusion. Are we ready for this? Terrell asked his daughters, the question more serious than rhetorical. Zara and Amara exchanged glances before Zara answered for both of them. We were born ready, Dad. Let's make Horizon the airline you always meant it to be. The Horizon Airlines shareholder meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning at the company's downtown Chicago headquarters. By 7:30, the building's lobby was already filled with financial reporters, industry analysts, and curious onlookers drawn by rumors of a dramatic showdown between Terrell Miles and his board of directors. Inside the executive suite, Terrell adjusted his tie as Sidney Powell briefed him on last-minute developments. Garrett Wilson has been calling shareholders all night, she reported. He's painting you as emotionally compromised, making this about your daughters rather than the company's best interests. Terrell nodded, unsurprised. And our allies? Holding firm. We have commitments representing 42% of voting shares. If we can persuade the institutional investors from Blackwater Fund, we'll have a majority. Down the hall, in a smaller conference room, Zara and Amara Miles prepared for their own roles in the day's events. Though not yet officially part of the company, their presence would be pivotal to the narrative Terrell planned to present. Nervous? Zara asked her sister, noting Amara's restless pacing. A little, Amara admitted. We're about to face the people who created a system that decided we didn't belong in first class because of how we look. It's personal. That's why our testimony matters, Zara replied. We make it impossible for them to dismiss this as abstract policy discussions. We put a face to it. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doors to Horizon's main conference room opened. The long mahogany table was surrounded by board members, major shareholders, and key executives. Terrell Miles took his place at the head of the table, with Sidney Powell beside him. Notably absent were Bradley Thompson and Diana Mercer, both of whom remained on administrative leave. Garrett Wilson, seated directly opposite Terrell, spoke first. Before we begin, I'd like to register my objection to the irregular nature of this meeting. The full board should have been consulted on the agenda. Your objection is noted, Terrell replied coolly. But as CEO and primary shareholder, I have the authority to call special meetings when circumstances warrant. And I believe a discrimination crisis qualifies. The tension in the room was palpable as Terrell outlined the events of the past 2 weeks, beginning with the incident involving his daughters and extending to the evidence of systemic discrimination uncovered since. What happened to Zara and Amara was not an isolated incident, he concluded. It was the inevitable result of a culture that I, allowed to develop through inattention and misplaced trust. Garrett Wilson leaned forward. No one is dismissing the seriousness of what occurred, Terrell. But your personal involvement has clouded your judgment. The actions you're proposing, a complete leadership overhaul, public disclosure of internal communications, a third-party audit of all our practices, could destroy shareholder value. Some things are more important than shareholder value, Terrell countered. The integrity of this company is one of them. Philip Carlson, Garrett's strongest ally on the board, interjected. This sounds dangerously like putting social justice ahead of fiduciary responsibility. I remind you that our legal obligation is to our shareholders. Terrell's expression hardened. I'm well aware of our legal obligations, Philip. I'm also aware that discrimination is both illegal and bad business. Before we continue this discussion, I believe my daughters have something to contribute. On cue, the conference room doors opened again, and Zara and Amara entered. Their presence created an immediate stir among the board members, some of whom shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For the next 20 minutes, the twins described not only the incident at O'Hare but the broader pattern they had helped uncover through interviews with former employees. Zara presented the data they had compiled, connecting specific policies to discriminatory outcomes in hiring, promotion, and customer treatment. This isn't about one flight attendant who made a bad decision, Amara concluded. This is about a system that encouraged and rewarded that decision. As the twins finished their presentation, the conference room doors opened once more. Veronica Hartwell entered, accompanied by her attorney. Her surprise appearance caused a ripple of murmurs around the table. What is the meaning of this? Garrett demanded. This meeting is for shareholders and board members only. MS. Hartwell has been invited at my request, Terrell stated calmly. As the employee at the center of this situation, her perspective is relevant. Veronica looked nervous but determined as she took the seat indicated by Sydney. Her attorney remained standing behind her. Ms. Hartwell, Terrell addressed her directly. You've made several public statements suggesting that your actions were consistent with Horizon's unwritten policies. I'd like you to elaborate on that for the board. Veronica glanced at her attorney, who nodded slightly. When I was trained, she began hesitantly, we were told that first class has a certain image to maintain. We were never explicitly told to discriminate, but the message was clear. Young passengers, especially minorities, were to be subject to extra scrutiny. And who provided this training? Terrell asked, though he already knew the answer. Bradley Thompson oversaw the customer experience training program. Diana Mercer from HR would sometimes participate in the sessions about passenger profiles. The revelation caused another stir around the table. Garrett Wilson attempted to regain control of the narrative. This is one employee's recollection of training that occurred years ago. It hardly constitutes evidence of a systematic problem. Sidney Powell chose that moment to distribute tablets to everyone at the table. These contain the emails recovered from the secondary server maintained by Mr. Thompson. I direct your attention particularly to the exchanges between Mr. Thompson, Ms. Mercer, and board members Wilson and Carlson regarding what they termed passenger suitability guidelines. The room fell silent as board members and shareholders reviewed the damning evidence. The emails revealed an explicit strategy to discourage certain demographics from accessing Horizon's premium services while maintaining plausible deniability. Most devastating were the messages from Garrett and Philip, clearly endorsing these practices while being careful to use coded language. In one exchange, Garrett had written, "The premium experience is our differentiator. If it becomes accessible to everyone, it loses its value. T doesn't need to know the details of implementation." The T clearly referred to Terrell. As the implication sank in, Terrell rose from his seat. I founded Horizon Airlines with a vision of excellence without exclusion. Some of you betrayed that vision. You implemented discriminatory practices behind my back, believing that profitability justified prejudice. He surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on Garrett and Philip. I am calling for an immediate vote. The resolution before you has 3 parts. First, The removal of board members Wilson and Carlson. Second, my authority to conduct a complete review of all company practices and personnel. And third, a public commitment to transparency as we address these issues. Garrett stood as well, his face flushed with anger. This is nothing short of a coup. If this resolution passes, I will personally lead a shareholder lawsuit against you for breach of fiduciary duty. That is your right, Terrell acknowledged. Just as it is the shareholders' right to decide what kind of company they want Horizon to be. What followed was 2 hours of intense debate as shareholders questioned both Terrell and the board members about the implications of the resolution. The institutional investors, initially reluctant to take sides, were swayed by the concrete evidence of discrimination and the clear liability it represented. The Miles twins remained in the room throughout, their presence a constant reminder of the human impact behind the corporate crisis. When Veronica Hartwell was questioned about her role, she surprised everyone with her candor. I was wrong, she admitted. I believed I was doing my job according to company expectations, but that doesn't excuse my actions. I humiliated 2 young women who had every right to be in first class, and I did it based on assumptions about who belongs in premium spaces. Her testimony further undermined Garrett's position, particularly when she revealed that he had personally commended her after an incident the previous year involving a similar situation with different passengers. As the debate wound down, Jackson Davies of Transcontinental Airways made an unexpected appearance. He had been waiting for this moment, armed with an acquisition offer that he believed a divided board would be forced to consider. Gentlemen, ladies, he began smoothly after being reluctantly granted the floor. Transcontinental recognizes that Horizon is at a crossroads. We're prepared to offer a solution that would provide certainty for shareholders during this difficult time. Terrell's eyes narrowed as Davies outlined an acquisition proposal valuing Horizon at 20% below its pre-crisis market value. The offer was deliberately timed to exploit the company's vulnerability and the board's division. This offer expires at the close of business today, Davies concluded. Given the circumstances, I believe it represents a prudent exit strategy for your shareholders. Before Garrett could express support for considering the offer, Zara Miles stood up. Though she had no official standing in the meeting, her quiet authority commanded attention. Mr. Davies, she addressed the rival CEO directly. If Transcontinental acquires Horizon, what would happen to the employees who have experienced discrimination? Would their complaints be addressed, or simply buried in the transition? Davies seemed taken aback by the direct question from the teenager. Well, naturally, we would. Review all outstanding personnel matters according to our own policies. And those policies are? Amara joined her sister, equally direct. I'm not prepared to discuss Transcontinental's internal policies in this forum, Davies hedged. Terrell smiled slightly, recognizing his daughter's strategy. They were exposing the hollow nature of Transcontinental's supposed commitment to diversity, forcing Davies to admit that his interest was purely opportunistic. I believe, Terrell said into the silence that followed, that we should proceed with our vote before considering any acquisition offers. Shareholders deserve to know exactly what they would be selling. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Terrell had hoped but still decisive. By a margin of 57% to 43%, the shareholders approved all 3 parts of his resolution. Garrett Wilson and Philip Carlson were removed from the board effective immediately, and Terrell received the mandate he needed to transform the company. As the meeting adjourned, Jackson Davies approached Terrell. You won this battle, he conceded. But the war isn't over. Your stock price will take another hit when this goes public. My offer remains open. Terrell met his gaze steadily. When I've finished rebuilding Horizon, Davies, you won't be able to afford it. The confrontation had been decisive, but as the Miles family gathered in Terrell's office afterward, they knew that the real work of transformation was just beginning. What happens now? Amara asked. Terrell looked at his daughters, then at Sidney Powell, who had proven herself an invaluable ally throughout the crisis. Now, he said, we build the airline I always intended Horizon to be. One flight at a time. 6 months after the shareholder showdown that had rocked the airline industry, Horizon Airlines corporate headquarters buzzed with anticipation. The atrium lobby, once an austere space dominated by cold marble and steel, had been redesigned to reflect the company's new identity. Vibrant artwork from diverse artists adorned the walls, and a massive digital display counted down the minutes to the official launch of Horizon's Inclusive Skies initiative. Terrell Miles stood before a podium emblazoned with the company's redesigned logo, surveying the gathered employees, media representatives, and industry observers. At 46, he looked simultaneously older and more vibrant than he had 6 months earlier. The crisis had taken its toll, etching new lines around his eyes, but had also infused him with renewed purpose. 6 months ago, he began, his deep voice carrying throughout the atrium. Horizon Airlines faced a moment of truth. We discovered that our company had fallen short of the values upon which it was founded. Today, we turn the page and begin a new chapter. In the front row, Zara and Amara Miles watched their father with pride. Now college freshmen at Harvard and Yale respectively, they had returned to Chicago for this special occasion. Despite the demands of their studies, both had remained actively involved in Horizon's transformation, serving as diversity ambassadors for the airline's new programs. The Inclusive Skies initiative isn't just a marketing campaign, Terrell continued. It represents a fundamental reimagining of how an airline can serve all its passengers with dignity and respect, regardless of race, gender, age, or appearance. The journey to this moment had been arduous. After the shareholder meeting, Terrell had moved swiftly to implement the mandated changes. Bradley Thompson, Diana Mercer, and 6 other executives were terminated for their roles in fostering discriminatory practices. A comprehensive third-party audit of all company policies revealed troubling patterns in everything from hiring practices to customer complaint resolution. Rather than trying to minimize these findings, Terrell had taken the bold step of making them public, along with a detailed plan for addressing each issue. The initial response from markets had been predictably negative, with Horizon stock dropping to its lowest point in 5 years. Jackson Davies and Transcontinental Airways had pounced, launching an aggressive campaign to poach Horizon's corporate clients and top talent. For several weeks, it seemed Terrell's gamble might fail catastrophically, threatening the very existence of the airline he had built from nothing. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Veronica Hartwell, who had been the face of the initial controversy, made a surprising decision. Rather than continuing to position herself as a victim of corporate scapegoating, she publicly acknowledged her role in the discriminatory incident and asked to be part of the solution. "I had a choice," she told the Chicago Tribune in a pivotal interview. "I could continue blaming the system, or I could help fix it. What happened with the Miles twins forced me to confront biases I didn't even realize I carried." Veronica's candor had resonated with the public in a way that carefully crafted corporate statements never could. When Terrell offered her a role in developing Horizon's new customer service training program, focused specifically on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias, the gesture transformed the narrative from one of corporate scandal to meaningful redemption. Now, 6 months later, Veronica stood among the employees attending the launch, her perspective invaluable in ensuring that the new policies addressed the realities of frontline staff interactions with diverse passengers. "Today, we unveil not just new policies, but a new corporate culture," Terrell announced, gesturing toward the massive screen behind him as it displayed key elements of the Inclusive Skies program. Comprehensive bias training for all customer-facing staff, transparent standards for first-class service applied equally to all qualifying passengers, diverse hiring targets at all levels of the organization, and independent review board for discrimination complaints, industry-leading family accommodations for employees. The changes weren't merely cosmetic. Horizon had completely restructured its executive leadership, promoting talented individuals who had previously been overlooked due to the company's biased evaluation systems. The board now reflected the diversity of Horizon's passenger base, with experts in inclusion added to ensure the airline wouldn't backslide. "The true measure of our success," Terrell continued, "will be when every passenger on every Horizon flight feels equally valued and respected. We're not there yet, but today represents a significant step forward." As he spoke, data appeared on the screen showing Horizon's gradual recovery. After the initial stock plunge, investor confidence had slowly returned as the company demonstrated its commitment to meaningful change. Most significantly, customer loyalty metrics had improved dramatically, with surveys showing increased satisfaction across all demographic groups. Jackson Davies had not given up easily. When his poaching tactics failed to deliver the exodus of clients he had anticipated, Transcontinental had launched a price war on key Horizon routes. The strategy backfired spectacularly when an internal Transcontinental memo leaked, revealing that Davies had instructed his team to capitalize on Horizon's diversity disaster. The backlash was swift and severe. Corporate clients, increasingly sensitive to diversity issues themselves, began scrutinizing Transcontinental's own practices. What they found was hardly impressive: an executive team and board even less diverse than Horizon's had been, with a similar pattern of discrimination complaints that had been quietly settled. Within weeks, Davies found himself facing the same kind of crisis he had hoped would destroy his competitor. The irony wasn't lost on industry observers, who noted that Horizon's transparent approach to addressing its problems had ultimately proven more effective than Transcontinental's attempt to exploit them. "We take no pleasure in our competitors' difficulties," Terrell stated diplomatically when asked about Transcontinental's subsequent struggles. "The issues we've confronted exist throughout the industry. Our hope is that our experience serves as a catalyst for broader change." After the formal presentation, Terrell joined his daughters for the symbolic first flight of the Inclusive Skies era, a special service from Chicago to New York featuring a crew that showcased Horizon's commitment to diversity. Captain Sarah Jimenez, a Latina pilot who had filed a discrimination complaint 3 years earlier only to have it buried by Bradley Thompson, now commanded the airline's flagship aircraft. As the Miles family settled into their first-class seats, Zara noticed something touching. The flight attendant serving their cabin was treating all passengers with the same warm professionalism, from the elderly black grandmother traveling to see her new grandchild to the young white tech executive typing furiously on his laptop. "It's working," she murmured to her father, nodding toward the seamless service being provided. Terrell smiled, though his expression remained thoughtful. "It's beginning to work," he corrected gently. "Real change takes time and constant vigilance. One flight doesn't make a new airline. But it's a start," Amara added from across the aisle. "A really good start." The in-flight announcement system chimed, and Captain Jimenez's voice filled the cabin. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard Horizon Airlines Flight 1619, the inaugural service of our Inclusive Skies program. On behalf of all of us at Horizon, I want to thank you for flying with us today and for being part of this important new beginning." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Terrell gazed out the window at the Horizon Airlines logo emblazoned on the terminal building. The company he had built had nearly been destroyed, not by external competition, but by internal corruption of its founding values. The painful lesson had cost millions in market value and countless hours of crisis management, but the airline emerging from that crucible was stronger, more authentic, and truer to his original vision than ever before. "You know," he said quietly to his daughters, "sometimes it takes a shock to the system to reveal what needs fixing. What happened to you both was inexcusable, but it forced us to confront problems we might have otherwise continued to ignore." Zara nodded, touching the small scar on her palm where Veronica's torn ticket had cut her 6 months earlier. "Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most painful experiences." As the aircraft lifted into the clear blue sky, Terrell Miles felt a sense of completion. The crisis that had begun with his daughters being denied their rightful place in first class had transformed into an opportunity to create an airline where everyone could be treated with dignity and respect. It wasn't just good ethics, as Horizon's recovering stock price demonstrated, it was also good business. The Miles family's journey had come full circle. What had started as a personal humiliation had evolved into a corporate revolution, setting new standards not just for Horizon Airlines but potentially for the entire industry. 6 months later, as the twins prepared to return to their respective universities for their second semester, they reflected on how a single moment of discrimination had changed the trajectory of their lives and their father's company. "I never thought our first trip to Paris would turn out like that," Amara said as they packed their bags in their childhood home. Zara smiled. "Dad already promised we'll go back this summer. A proper vacation this time. With no corporate crisis to manage." Amara raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves," Zara laughed. When they arrived at O'Hare for their flights, Zara to Boston, Amara to New Haven, they approached the first-class check-in counter with a confidence that came from knowing they belonged, not just because of who their father was, but because of who they were. The flight attendant who greeted them was professional and warm, treating them exactly as she treated the businessman ahead of them and the elderly couple behind. No special deference, no undue scrutiny, just the respectful service every passenger deserved. As Terrell watched his daughters board their respective flights, he felt an immense pride that transcended their academic achievements or the family business. Together, they had transformed a moment of injustice into an opportunity for meaningful change. Horizon Airlines had not only survived its darkest hour but emerged stronger, more principled, and more successful than before. The company now stood as a model for how confronting discrimination directly could lead to better business outcomes and a more inclusive future. What would your reaction be if you experienced discrimination like the Miles twins did? Would you have the courage to turn it into positive change? Share your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and transformation. Thank you for watching this journey from discrimination to vindication. Remember that sometimes our most painful experiences can lead to the most important positive changes in our lives and in society. This powerful story teaches us that discrimination often lurks beneath the surface of even the most seemingly progressive organizations. Terrell Miles built an airline focused on excellence but failed to recognize how others had corrupted his vision by equating excellence with exclusivity. The incident with his daughters became a necessary catalyst for change, revealing systematic problems that might have otherwise remained hidden. The story also demonstrates that addressing discrimination requires more than just punishing individual offenders. True change demands examining and transforming entire systems and cultures. By confronting the problem openly rather than minimizing it, Horizon Airlines ultimately emerged stronger. Perhaps most importantly, the Miles twins show us that standing up against discrimination isn't just about personal vindication, it's about creating lasting change that benefits everyone. Their willingness to cut short their dream vacation and actively participate in the solution transformed a personal humiliation into a force for positive transformation. True leadership means taking responsibility even for problems you didn't personally create. Terrell's willingness to acknowledge his oversight and completely rebuild his company's culture exemplifies how confronting painful truths can lead to greater integrity and success. What would you do if faced with discrimination like the Miles twins? Would you speak up or stay silent? Share your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more powerful stories of people overcoming injustice. Your experiences matter. They might inspire others to stand against discrimination too. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes our most painful moments can become our greatest opportunities for positive change.